Rik Hart, thank you for speaking with Central Coast Newspapers once again. Happy New Year.
Thank you, David, and Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
And how do you think 2023 is going to be for the council?
Well, I'm hoping it'll be a great year, and that the year we're looking forward, and we'll be improving some of the things that we've been getting onto during the last 12 months. But in the new year, I'm hoping that our service levels will improve, our customer satisfaction levels will improve, and we will do a better job. We've got some of the technology in place now that we were missing beforehand, and now that the organisation has settled down a lot after our little debacle with the finances, people are feeling more comfortable inside the organisation, and the threat and the fear of losing revenue and going through the IPART processes is now behind us. So we're stable and we're already seeing some improvement, but we still have a way to go.
We reported last week on the improving finances, or David Farmer reported at the meeting and yourself about the improving finances. So we're in the black, as in we're in surplus, I take it. Now, I'd like to ask you a question about one of our readers, Kevin Brooks, who asked a particular question in the paper about the rate increase, and he's discovered 41% of the rate increase is only going down to debt repayment. Now, I understand that the rate increase that you put forward is more to do not just debt repayment, it's something else. Can you walk us through that? What is the rate increase, the special rate variation for over the 10 years?
Well, thank you for that, David, because I too have had a lot of people somewhat confused and not quite understanding how it all worked. The first things we need to talk about is there's two separate elements. The first element is our trading position, and whether we're earning more than we're spending.
So this is profit and loss.
That's your P&L account and so on. So it's just as you in your household budget, you look at your weekly or monthly or yearly salary, and you look at what your expenditure is, and hopefully you've got a little bit left over which goes into a savings account, although no doubt this day and age inflation's reducing that amount down.
Now, it was in the red prior to you, the administrators, your predecessor,
Yes.
and coming on board, and now it's in the black.
So we start with the two previous years, to me coming on board and Dick Person coming on board, were successive losses of 90 million and 70 odd million dollars. So the second problem we had was we ran out of cash. Now, we ran out of cash because we overexpended in terms of the council operations side, and we lost revenue from water and sewer when IPART reduced the water and sewer fees and charges. So we lost revenue and we increased expenditure. That culminated in the fact that we made significant losses for the two prior years. When we had to recapitalise the business or refinance it, we had to go to the big banks to do that, and the last loan for the $100 million, the only way we could get that $100 million, now we needed that $100 million to partially pay off some of the unlawfully used funds. We also needed to be able to fund the severance payments and the redundancy payments from the staff that unfortunately we had to let go. And we also needed to make sure we had some working capital to be able to cover our day-to-day expenditure.
So in a way, this restructure was necessary to get the loan. Now, I understand it was only really in the last minute that the loan came through.
The loan came through literally just before Christmas, and the conversation I had with the Rob Stokes, the Minister for Planning at the time, and I happen to know him from my days down on the Northern Beaches, I said to Rob, if I don't get this loan through by 3 o'clock, it was actually 4 o'clock that Friday afternoon before Christmas, I'm going to have to close the business down. So we did get that through, and we did get the loan. So the important thing now about going back to the rate increase, so when we talked to the banks, there was only one bank that would deal with us, and that was why I needed that conversation and that letter of comfort from the state government at the time. Now, the conditions the bank imposed was, firstly, you have to increase your revenue. Now, the only way we could increase our revenue was, of course, to go and apply for an SRV.
This is a special rate
So
variation.
that was the special rate variation, correct, which at the time was 13% plus the rate peg, which made it a total of 15%. The second thing we had to do on the revenue side, which the bank insisted upon, is recover the money that IPART had taken off us, somewhere in the order of $38 million per annum. So the bank, as a condition, said you have to recover that revenue side. They also asked us to reduce our costs by close on 70 million, which turned out to be closer to 50 million at the time because a lot of people had already left. But that was a combined sort of cost reduction both in salaries and also in operating expenditure, contract management, those sorts of things. So those two things we had to do, and we had to sell $60 odd million worth of assets. So those are the conditions the bank imposed.
And what about just to pause here, what about the debt repayment? That is to say the access to the funds that shouldn't have been accessed.
So the rate increase was the revenue component that the bank said.
Mm-hmm.
That allowed us to bring our trading position into a surplus. Now, what the 10-year plan and the forecast we gave to the bank was, over the 10 years, the surplus of, let's call it sort of roughly, $10, $12 million, that over the 10 years was going to repay that $100 million loan. So that's why people, I think, can understand that maybe some of the money goes in, but you see the rate increase was to get the trading position right, and it was not directly going from the rate increase to repay the loan. It was the profit or the surplus left over after trading that went towards repaying the loan. So on the other side, now how does the debt get repaid? Well, the debt was being repaid with those surpluses, but it was also being reduced down by the 60 million that we sold from asset sales, and also by getting some grant monies and so on that came through. So that was how the whole plan worked out. So unfortunately, that it was confused, and I believe IPART was confused at the time. I think they thought that the extra revenue, and that's why they gave us the extra 3 years, gave it only 3 years, was to go straight towards debt repayment. IPART didn't understand that the fundamentals of the business was to get the trading side right,
So
and
back
then
into the black, basically.
and basically into the black, and then enable that surpluses
I
to
think
be.
this is very interesting, important for people to understand. So over the years we've reported on this, and dozens of reports, it's actually quite hard to get your head around. So if I can paraphrase, you saying we have to get the council back into the black, and also pay back some of the loans at the same time, so that we can go forward into a black position. Now, are we in that position now, and will it continue that way? Has it gone to plan?
It has 100% gone to plan. In fact, it's gone better than according to plan, and there's some benefits to that which I'll go into. The first thing is, as of the end of November, we had about a $28 million surplus for the year to date. So that's for the first 5 months of trading.
That's significantly higher than forecast.
It's significantly higher to forecast. Now, some of the reasons for that is we get grant monies in advance, which has to show as revenue stream, and also we get a lot of rate paid in up front. Yeah. So a lot of people pay their rate instalment right up front. So you get a lot more money in up front, and that gets taken out later. Because the way we run on our monthlies is we assume that we're going to get all the rates money in, because we get 99% of it in, and we divide it by 12. So we say each month we're going to get 1/12 of the rates. So that makes it, that way you can keep track as to how the council's expenditure is going against its income. So our cash position.
Is this why you report every month at the meeting, a monthly
Correct.
Financial position?
So that's why we look like we've got more cash now, because we've had more money coming in. But from a trading point of view, we're being very careful to say, well, look, whilst we might have got more cash in, we should have only had, for that month, we had 1/12 of the money, of the total come in. So we limit the revenue side to 1/12 from the rates, right the way throughout
the year. So you don't look at the piggy bank, basically?
No, we don't. So that money then gets invested, and what happens is you start to see a change where cash flow will actually be getting more money will be going out and less money coming in. So that's a cash flow item, but from a trading perspective, we're actually looking positive all the way through. So that $28 million, as you correctly said, is well above where we were budgeting. I am going to change, I hope, the end of the last table, the last page, sorry, the last column in the table, to where we forecast what our year-end position will be. One looks at the table
based on the latest
based on our current things. I'm going to ask the staff to say, this is what we forecast we're going to be at the end of the year. At the moment, we put in there the Q for right now in the November one. We said this is what the Q1 budget said. Yeah. The important thing, that doesn't tell anybody where we're likely to end up the year. So what I want is the group managers and unit managers and the directors in here to be able to look ahead and forecast where we're going to be. That's why we call it.
That must be a good management tool
for
them.
Correct.
Now, because of this surplus, I mean, the question that comes to mind, I'm sure viewers and listeners will say, well, what are we going to use it for? Or what are you going to use it on our behalf for?
Well, not this last council meeting, but the one before that, we created a debt repayment reserve. So we have an internally restricted reserve, which is there to repay the debt. Now, that $100 million loan that we took, the way that loan is structured, we only pay the interest for the first 3 years. Then there's what's called a balloon payment, where you pay all the capital that should have been repaid on a principal and interest repayment cycle.
So it's an offset account.
So in a sense, yes. But we do have the opportunity to repay then. So what we've done is we've put 50 million aside already into that reserve. So when we come up to renegotiate that particular debt towards the end of this year, we will repay 50 of it. So half of it will be repaid. Now, I believe when you've got $28 million sitting there in surplus already, we're probably going to do quite well, and I'm hoping we'll get more money able to go.
So this will reduce interest costs, I take it?
Absolutely. Well, what it does, it means that those surpluses that we projected out in the 10-year financial plan, which has in those 10 years, bear in mind that it was the surplus over 10 years that was going to originally repay that 100 million. What we're now doing is repaying it much faster from a cash perspective, and that means the principal and interest that was budgeted for out in those other years will be available for other uses. So my intention by the time